Hey guys, you are somebody who wants to make suggestions to improve your organization. You are somebody who goes into your organization with great ideas. You look, you watch, you do internal audits, you do process reviews, and you're somebody who is trying to help the organization. You're passionate about what your organization does, but you're finding that it's getting really frustrating that your ideas aren't getting put across, or that people are just nodding, or they're disagreeing with your suggestions for improvement. You might be somebody who is constantly rejected when you're pitching your ideas or you're pitching your suggested improvements to the people around you in your organization. They're saying, no, that won't work, no, that won't work, no, that won't work, no, that's not right, that's not true, those sorts of things. And it's just making you more and more frustrated, and you're thinking about throwing in the towel and giving up on making suggestions at all. What I want to do for you in this video, in our weekly live stream here at Best Practice, is say thanks for having us back. We've had a little bit of a hiatus. I've had some time off and I've been traveling and going to conferences and doing a whole bunch of stuff. So we're back on the Best Practice Wednesday live stream. What I want to do for you in this video, and it's one of our weekly videos, is talk to you about how to manage that in yourself and how to make more influential suggestions for the organization that you're working with, or you're going into an organization. Maybe you don't work there, you're contracted and you're a consultant, you're an independent operator, you're going into an organization. You might be an independent third-party auditor. How do you manage A, your frustration, and B, make more influential suggestions? So, welcome back to Best Practice. My name's Kobe Simmet. I'm the CEO here at Best Practice, and we are really passionate about helping organizations with improvement, seeing 100 million organizations inspired to improve, and having inspired customers that are going to love their customer service. They're going to love what they're doing. We want to help your organization to have great customer service, to have great safety, great environmental sustainability, great cybersecurity, great risk management, so that you can be a safe, profitable, sustainable company into the future. So let's talk about this situation. So I just want to tell you about a bit of a story. Early on in my career, I was one of those guys, you know me well if you watch this channel, you know I don't stop talking. And I was one of those guys in my mid-20s, after I'd finished my college degree, going into organizations or working in organizations, high energy, and the person that people like to have around, because I bring a lot of energy to the office and the kind of energy that I put through this channel to you guys. And I was getting frustrated with myself because I was seeing opportunities for improvement. And I'm the sort of guy that I don't play politics, I don't have any of that going on. I'm like, right, there's a problem, let's solve it. Here's another problem, let's solve it. I'm a solutions guy. I like helping organizations, looking at situations and looking at a better version, and ultimately taking that pain that the organizations are feeling and helping them with transformation, helping them with that transformation from that painful, frustrating, inefficient, messy situation that's going on to a better version of what's going on. And what I was finding, I was getting quite frustrated because I'm making suggestions to people and I'm saying, hey, let's try this, let's do this, let's do this. And the responses I was getting all the time was, that won't work, this isn't going to work. And I was making, improvement suggestions about how to manage the productivity of a particular team, how to manage some of our risks. And more importantly, I guess what the trigger for me was people were saying, this problem that we're having, this complaint we're getting, it always happens. And so in the early part of my career, and this is sort of tip number one in this video for you, is to listen out for the word always. When you're in conversations with people, in organizations, listen out for the word always. And always was that signal. It was like, this always happens. And that was really thinking, okay, well, there is an opportunity for improvement. There is somebody who else in the organization is frustrated and they've got an issue, and we can start to say, well, actually, I'm hearing that that's an issue for you. So rather than the things that I thought were problems that needed to be solved, I started to see the problems and challenges of other people. So initially what was happening is I was making suggestions about the things I wanted to improve. I wasn't making suggestions about the things that others wanted to improve. And I guess tip number two is starting to help people. So rather than just saying, try this, do this, and get rejected, start to help people with the concept of, have you got any challenges? Do you need any help? And that's when you can start to see or validate whether what you're seeing as a problem is actually a problem. Can you measure it? Can you see it? Because I've seen so many people go into organizations and straight off the back, you should do this, you should fix this, those sorts of things. And I have also, in my career, been the person that said, no, that won't work, this isn't going to work, I've tried that, or I've tried this, or I've seen that before, it's not going to work. And I don't like being that person, and I don't want to stifle people's enthusiasm for making suggestions, but it's something I want you guys to consider. So the first the first thing is listening out for that word always. And then the second thing is starting to look at people and say, okay, well, what are the challenges that they're experiencing? So tip number 3 in our tips today is to think about, okay, well, what's the performance measure? What's the number? And I wrote it down here, what are the numbers and outcomes if it was performance-based system? So if the team, like the team here at Best Practice out here in the office, if they're working towards a performance outcome, then they might have their own way of getting to that. And so we really want to be saying, okay, well, the question is why? Like the Simon Sinek talks about start with why. You can ask that question why. You can say, well, why are we doing this? What's the outcome we're trying to achieve, and how would we measure an improvement? Because that comes back to you and it comes back to your suggestions. Are you clear? Are you clear on the suggestions or recommendations that you're making, and are they measurable? And is that the thing that's measurable for that person that you're trying to pitch your idea to? Like if people come into my office, and my office is behind the studio here, people come into my office every day and they're like, I want to do this, I want to improve this. And I'm like, okay, great. And I might say yes and I might say no. But what I'm not very good at communicating is I'm not very good at communicating and turning around and saying, okay, well, what's the number? So if we were to put this on a graph, a performance over time graph, this area you're trying to improve, this suggestion you're trying to make, would I be able to measure the improvement? Would I see that improvement? And at that point in time in my career, that was the birth of this logo, which is the performance over time graph, when we started to say, well, we want to go from here to here, we want to improve, but we've got to go down a little bit. And that's when we started to frame up the best practice graph, if you like, or the best practice improvement. So I really want you to ask yourself that question. So before you open your big mouth, like I have in the past, have a think about what's the number. That person that's managing that process, you want to give them some guidance, some coaching. You want to say, okay, well, how do we go about doing that? You want to say, well, okay, well, take a step back yourself and figure out what's the number. How am I going to measure the improvement? And then is my way going to be more efficient, more effective, cheaper, more productive, safer than the other person's way in terms of making the improvement? Because what I will honestly say in all my years, in the 20 years that I've been doing this, that is often not the case. 90% of the time when people are making recommendations and suggestions, they have not thought about how we would measure the improvement of that, and they've not also thought about what the rollout or implementation plan or execution plan might be. They just come in, they have an idea, one complaint, one situation. No always, it's one complaint, one situation, one set of circumstances. They get frustrated with that in the moment. They come into my office and they make a suggestion. And so that's why I suggest, tip number 2, was listen out for always. What was that one? I can't remember. So think about that in terms of listening out for always, because always is it's happening frequently, it's multiple times, and then you can say, actually, we have got a business case because it's happening quite regularly, then we can work together as a team. And I think that's the second part of the two big parts of this, is how do you manage your own frustration? How do you manage your own suggestions? The first thing is to really think about, you guys need to be working in a team, and you're going to be more effective. Like it's, the end result is greater than the sum of the parts. And so I want you guys to be thinking about, okay, what's their circumstance? What's the transformation that they need? What's the pain they're feeling? They might not even be feeling the pain, or the pain of that solution or problem that you're trying to solve. In the bigger scheme of things, there might be some much, much larger problems that need to be solved. And you're going in and making suggestions and recommendations about something that's just not a show-stopping risk for the organisation. Oh, we want to tweak this, we want to improve that. And they step back and go, what the fuck are you making those recommendations for when we've got much, much bigger problems to deal with? And you know what? I'd appreciate if you put your effort and time and energy into helping me with this. Sorry, it's turning into a bit of a rant, but it's something I want you guys to think about, because if you can take a step back, just hold your breath, keep your mouth shut for 5 more minutes, then you'll start to understand actually there's some bigger problems or bigger challenges to solve. And then you're not going to get frustrated by making the suggestion, because you actually took a moment to actually look at the context, look at your surroundings and understand. Now, if you've done that, excellent, because then the next step in terms of managing your frustration, and this is something that I had to learn, and I only really learned it about 3 or 4 or maybe 5 years ago, was ask permission. And so that was something that I neglected to do and I neglected to learn, because I talk so much and I make so much noise and I want to help people improve and I'm really passionate about it. I'm like, right, you know what you should do? You know what you should do? You should, and I use my finger and the word should. And so if you check back over my LinkedIn articles and the articles I've put up there, I talked about why I banned the word should and why I stopped using my finger. So when you point your finger at somebody and you say should, you're telling them what to do. And you know what? You or I, nobody likes to be told what to do. People like to be inspired to do something, and they will come up with the idea themselves and be creative and say, right, recognizing that I've got a problem. And so in place of saying, you know, what you should do, it's asking permission. Hey, I see you might have a challenge. Is it a challenge for you? I can give you some suggestions. Would you like my assistance? And that is using respect and your manners to assist and say, I think I see a challenge. Is it important for you? Is it an issue? Is it a risk? I've got some thoughts around how that situation could be improved. Do you want my assistance? And they might say no. Don't get offended by that, because the balance here is you might be like, oh, okay, well, maybe it's not a problem. I need to go back and think about it. And my point here is about managing your own frustration and your own concerns, because I know a bunch of you out there, you're asking me questions. I'm getting lots and lots of comments. How do I get my team's buy-in? And part of this presentation and part of this video today is to talk about, well, how do you manage your frustration? How do you manage your influence? And then really the question is, what are you trying to get your team to buy into? Buy into your suggestions, buy into your recommendations, buy into the management system that you wrote without consulting them. And that's the other issue that I see all of the time. It's one of the biggest mistakes that I see systems managers, quality managers or safety manager, environment managers that write all of these documents that you guys have. There's no consultation. There's no ownership of the other parts of the business. And then by and large, they're not solving, they're not controlling risks that those other people in the organization see are a problem, and they don't agree with what you've suggested in terms of how to improve it. So today was really about how do we use, those tools, I guess, because when you're doing internal audits, and I'll circle back to the title of the video here today, often when you're in that role of an internal auditor or a reviewer or a process improver or a quality manager, when you're that person, you are somebody who is starting to say, well, I'm going to make suggestions for improvement. I'm going to be in there doing that. Now the standards, obviously, in the definition of audits, is you're the person that needs to sit on the fence, not have an opinion, not make suggestions. And the thing that I hear discussed the most is around internal auditors not designing the system or writing the system because you're going to be auditing your own work, but you're out there. It's meant to drive you to be the coach. Ask questions, don't give instructions. In terms of being a great leader, we talk about great leaders, asking great questions, and great assessors or internal auditors asking great questions, or great process improvers, change managers, risk managers. We ask great questions, and we use those questions to unpack, get people to appreciate that there might be a concern or a risk or an issue that's not being managed, or even the team's not aware of. And then the second thing is to say, well, is that an issue for you? Is that something that could come up? What is that going to do for the organization? How's that going to affect you? All those sorts of things. So I want you to start thinking about how can you use, the 5 W's and an H: who, what, when, where, how, and why, and be ensuring that you're finishing your sentences with a question mark. So what can you do about, can you please show me this area? I want to have a look at the process. I want to see if there's opportunities for improvement. Can you please show me? Can you please talk me through what you're doing? That thing you're doing there, do you think that's a concern? Do you think we could improve that? What do the results look like? Are the results where you want them to be? Have you got objectives and targets? Are you hitting your objectives and targets? Because when we ask those great questions, it's going to help us with our side, which is to actually appreciate the context. And then you might say, and what do you think you could do? You're in this, you're doing this job every single day. You're in this every single day. What do you think you could do to improve? And so these are all the great ways to have effective impact from things like internal audits. It's not just about, how many documents have you got? How many folders do you have? What are your processes? What are you doing? It's about understanding and saying, well, what do you think could go wrong in the next quarter? What are the things that you guys could be working on or improving in terms of controls to prevent those circumstances occurring? So I want you guys to be thinking about that. So really that's a wrap for today's live stream. I just wanted to give you some quick tips and tricks. I wanted to talk to you about how to be more effective and influential, and also how to contain yourself in terms of if you are frustrated. And I'm getting a ton of questions, lots of messages through on my LinkedIn. If you want to ask me questions personally, the best place to do that is to send me a direct message on LinkedIn. You can search for me at Kobe Simat. We'll put the handle in the description below. Go into the description below. Now, are you somebody who is making suggestions for improvement? Comment yes, below if you're someone who's making suggestions for improvement in what you're doing in your organization. And if you're someone who's not making suggestions for improvement, if you're somebody who's just doing those processes, comment no below. I love to read the comments and see, and I'll get a bit of a gauge. We'll all get a bit of a gauge about who's watching this video, who's saying yes, who's saying no. So let me know, yes or no, are you somebody who is making suggestions for improvement? Are you somebody who's doing internal audits? Are you a systems manager, a quality manager? Let me know in the comments below. I look at all of the comments. And if you want to send me a direct, quiet, private message, if you've got a question, if you need some help, send me a direct message on LinkedIn. You can find me, search LinkedIn at Kobe Simmet. There's not many of us in the world with that particular name, so you'll find me. I'm pretty unique. And then check out, if you like this video, give us a like, smash that like button, and more importantly, subscribe and turn on your notifications. So if there are more videos that you're interested in seeing from us here at Best Practice, when you hit subscribe, you become part of the Best Practice family, and you're going to get all of our notifications. Now we have got a webinar coming up that I want you to think about watching. We're going to put the link to that webinar below. It's something that you can go and check in more detail. I go into an in-depth review. We talk about internal audits. We've got a couple of very popular videos here on the YouTube channel about internal audits and the things we're doing. But I'd like you to check out the webinar that we've got for you. So look for the link below in the description. Click on that link and that'll take you through to the registration page. And I'll take you in-depth over an hour, and I think it's over an hour's worth of content that we're going to be going through and talking through that webinar, how our in-depth summary on conducting internal audits, how to be influential, how to follow the intent of the different ISO standards. So hit the subscribe button, look out for our notifications, find me on LinkedIn, and I'm going to see you right here next time on Best Practice TV. Bye for now.